Hello and welcome back to Parc Fermé Parlay with Kieran Downey. We're here after the Singapore qualifying session to break down a pretty interesting qualifying. There was some drivers that I thought would be further ahead, further up the pack, that are behind where I believe they would be, and there's a couple of drivers that are towards the front that I actually thought would maybe be a little bit behind. But it was a very exciting, very enjoyable qualifying session to watch. So let's get into it. And Q1, now out in Q1 was Zhou Guanyu, Valtteri Bottas, Pierre Gasly, Lance Stroll, and Daniel Ricciardo. The start of Q1 was, my God, it was mind-numbing. And all the drivers were just crawling around the track. And I think it started the same every session. They just were creeping around so as to not take anything out of their tyres, because that is one thing that has really caught the drivers out this qualifying session, is the huge difference in the tyres between FP3 and the quali sessions. Like, George Russell was one of the biggest ones to complain about the tyres. Apparently, I didn't realise this, but apparently Martin Brundle had said that Pirelli were actually a little bit upset with George Russell after Baku because of his comments on the tyres, and he went hell for leather today about them. And I think everybody just really struggled. The drivers were wrestling those cars around the tracks. It was pretty nerve-wracking. Like, it was unnerving to watch, because I was going to say how somebody didn't end up in the barrier, but somebody did. So that's null and void. But how more drivers didn't end up in the barriers, I'll actually never know, because there was some mighty close calls. But let's get into the drivers that were out. Zhou Guanyu, P20, Valtteri Bottas, P19. I'm just so bored of talking about them being last. I say this all the time. Why do they even bother? Why are they even bothering going out? Do you know what I mean? What's the point? Why even bother going qualifying? Because you're not going to get anywhere. I actually don't want to talk about it anymore. I'm sick of it. Pierre Gasly, a little bit surprised that he is out in Q3. I actually thought he'd managed to get a little bit further up, but just couldn't pull a lap time together. Same with Lance Stroll, who couldn't get a decent time on the board. Surprising, because Alonso did manage to make it into Q3, so I kind of thought that Stroll might be able to... Like, the difference between those two is huge. Absolutely huge. And it makes me wonder, when Adrian Newey joins this team, and say Newey comes in to Aston Martin and, develops an absolute fucking rocket ship, is Lance Stroll just still not going to be able to do anything with it? Because Alonso got a pretty decent qualifying result. So what's going on there, eh? Exactly, I'm not too sure myself. P16, Daniel Ricciardo, not what he would be wanting, especially at a time like this, when literally we've come into this weekend and everyone is talking about, well, one of three things: Max swearing and getting a penalty, McLaren's rear wing, and the future of Daniel Ricciardo. And I don't know how many of you seen Christian Horner's interview with Sky Sports, but Horner basically all but confirmed it without actually saying the words, "This will be Daniel Ricciardo's last weekend." He was talking about how, there's a natural break. There's about 3 or 4 weeks in between Singapore and Circuit of the Americas. It's a great time to reevaluate the dynamics of the teams and the structure of the teams and the performance of the drivers. And he was saying how there's so many junior drivers in the Red Bull junior program. A driver in F3, I can't remember what his name was. That's going to annoy me. Isaac Hadjar in F2, Liam Lawson. He said there's so many talented drivers in that junior program. And Martin Brundle made a very good point that Red Bull is known for promoting and giving young drivers a chance. They sort of cycle through drivers like nobody else. And he basically all but gave it away. I think he was trying a little bit hard to navigate the questions, but I think it's safe to say that this will be the last weekend we see Daniel Ricciardo racing in an F1 car. I'm almost certain now that in between Singapore and Kota, we will get the announcement that Danny Rick's out. There's the saying that there's no smoke without fire. And every time we've sort of had this discussion, there's been like a little bit of smoke. It's like Helmut Marko giving a soundbite to a newspaper. It's like a tiny little flame, right? The whole house is on fire. There is so much smoke. And even Daniel Ricciardo, you can see it in him. His whole demeanour has changed. when he's questioned about it. And I think it was Simon Lazenby actually asked Horner, like, is there a thing that if Daniel Ricciardo, say, gets a podium this weekend, which was looking pretty doable maybe by the VCARB team in practice because they were flying, does that, maybe secure his spot till the end of the year? And Horner didn't really answer the question. He didn't really answer any of the questions posed to him. And if that is the case, that there is maybe a little clause in Danny's contract that says, you know what, score a podium, and we'll keep you on for another however many races. Then he's gone. He's gone. And even Daniel said himself, he was like, I know that there's timings. There was a timing at the summer break. There's a timing again now, just after Singapore. That time's upon us. Whatever will happen, will happen. I just think it's curtains on Daniel Ricciardo's F1 career. I think we'll be seeing Liam Lawson in Kota, and I don't think we're in for a storming performance from Daniel Ricciardo over the Grand Prix tomorrow. So it's a shame on that. But moving on to Q2, and out in Q2 was Esteban Ocon, Kevin Magnussen, Sergio Perez, Franco Colapinto and Alex Albon. Again, drivers wrestling these cars around. Like, they just can't. None of them. I don't think anyone feels 100% comfortable in the car. Even Max. Max literally went and set the fastest lap. And just before he crossed the line, he went off, set the fastest lap, and then had his lap time deleted for track limits. George Russell complaining about his tyres again. Alex Albon complaining about tyres. Like, everyone is just struggling with their tyres and with grip on this track. And nobody, even like Lando, who's setting like lightning fast times, is even saying like, it's really difficult out there. Like, it's hard. So it is, I think, going to be a bit of a struggle. It'll be interesting to see how the race goes tomorrow. But Esteban Ocon being out, this is where I kind of thought the Alpines would be. I kind of expected them to be out in Q2. So not really a surprise there. Magnussen, considering Hulkenberg got a very good result for qualifying, do I kind of expect him to be a little bit higher? Not really, actually. I'd say out in Q2 for Magnussen's fairly on point. Hulkenberg is an incredible qualifier. We'll obviously come into him in a second. So not that surprised. Perez being out in Q2, not great. Not great. Considering where Verstappen has actually managed to place this car, they would really have been wanting Perez to line up in and around Verstappen to kind of help play defense. Verstappen is kind of just out there on his own, and in a championship fight that is going to go down to the wire, a little helping hand from your teammate would have been nice. But unfortunately, Perez out. Horner even said himself, Daniel Ricciardo was here in case Perez fell off a cliff. Perez's performance hasn't been great, but Daniel's performance also hasn't been great. So what are they going to do with these spots? Because, okay, it's all but confirmed basically that Daniel Ricciardo's out. Got ya. But Perez this year, I would say, has lost them the constructors. And how are they okay with keeping Perez on? I don't know. I think they can't seem to get this second driver nailed down at Red Bull. And it's a worry for them because Max is struggling in the car. He's still doing great things in that car, but Perez's performance does need to be a bit better. And I know I said that I think a lot of it is down to the car, and I still agree with that. They're going to need to find someone. If the performance of the car isn't going to be as great, they're going to need to find someone to stick in that car alongside Max that is capable of being in and around Verstappen. Alex Albon and Franco Colapinto kind of thought that they'd maybe make it to Q3. To be honest with you, I was expecting a little bit better, but they were like marginally, the pair of them, marginally close to making it into Q3. And both drivers were told that by James Vowles. They were both like apologizing over the radios, and James was like, no, yous are doing fantastic laps. You're doing great lap times, but it's so close out there. And, we, on our side of things, the mechanical engineering and pit wall side of things, haven't done everything correctly to allow you to get up in there. But everything you're doing with what we have given you is on point, stellar. You guys have done nothing wrong. And every time Franco Colapinto goes out in that car, I am just more and more impressed by him. He was 7,000ths of a second behind Albon. That man has either been right behind Albon or just in front of him for the last 3 races. And considering the fact that Logan Sargent couldn't get close to Albon really at all, fantastic work, I would say, from Colapinto, and a great shout from James Vowles to put him in the car. Fantastic shout. I remember when the news came out that Sargent was out and Colapinto was in, we were all like, is this going to be any better? Because you're replacing what was essentially a rookie in F1 that wasn't performing with a rookie who's also, I think, in his rookie year of F2. So you're putting him into the car, and do you really expect he's going to be better? And now, look at us. We're all eating our words, because Franco Colapinto's class, I've seen the stuff, and James Vowles has said that, you know, he's spoken to Sauber about getting Colapinto into that second seat, and he's having the conversations. I believe the Sauber were also looking at Bortoleto, who's currently competing in F2 as well. However, I have just seen some news that Valtteri Bottas has extended with Sauber on a 1-year contract, and that next year, 2025, will be Valtteri's probably last year within F1, because the team will look for another driver for 2026. But they just, I think, don't seem keen to put anybody other than a sort of experienced driver in the car for next year, especially when the performance of the car, I can't imagine, is going to be that great. That's it. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll see Colapinto on the grid for next year. But as I said, when we spoke about Colapinto, he could still go back to F2 next year, compete in F2, and he could, even if he goes and wins F2 next year and then can't compete anymore, he can then go and take on a reserve driver role, or, you know, whatever it is, for a year. And then, you know, you've got opportunities. He's got opportunities at the end of 2025 to get entry into the sport, and he'll have opportunities into 26 and everything like that as well. So these races will not be the last we see of Franco Colapinto in F1, I can imagine. All right, Q3, and the order of the top 10 is P10 Carlos Sainz, Charles Leclerc, Yuki Tsunoda, Fernando Alonso, Nico Hülkenberg, P5 Oscar Piastri, George Russell, Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, Lando Norris. So the session had basically all but started. Again, all the cars are like creeping out of the pits. I think Oscar Piastri and Nico Hülkenberg were the only 2 drivers to actually set a time before Carlos Sainz caused a red flag and binned it into the barriers. If you watch the onboards, he basically slowed right down and backed off so much to let Piastri past him, and then just fired up, revved up the car, and off he went. And as he was coming around that last turn, just to start his flying lap, he lost control of the car and, as I said, binned it into the barrier, back end gone. Session was red flagged. He said he wasn't sure whether it was the cold tyres or, you know, getting into the dirty air of Piastri, but he just lost control of the car. So he was out, unfortunately. He actually then crossed the track on foot without permission, which was then sent to the stewards, and it has actually just come out just there that he has been fined 25,000 euros for breaching the regulations, 12,500 of which has been suspended till the end of the year, should he not commit a same breach of the regulations. So as long as he doesn't crash his car and walk across the track again, he should be grand. Next, Leclerc, P9. How has Ferrari gone from looking the fastest in practice sessions to P9, P10? Can somebody please tell me why? How has this happened? Do you know what? I shouldn't have even got my hopes up. I was all cocky going into my predictions with my Charles Leclerc on pole, and I think I even put him to win. My little graphic went out today with my predictions of Charles on pole, and what's happened? He's P9. He's P9. It's just depressing. It's so depressing being a Ferrari fan. See, the highs are so high. The Monzas, the Monacos, the highs are high. The lows, they're low. In his post-quali chat with the media, the best he's kind of aiming for is a sort of P5, P6, I think he said. And it will be an absolute miracle if he can get a P3. He was actually sitting in a pretty decent position. I can't remember. I think he was sitting like 4th or something, was he not? I can't remember. But he was sitting all right, and then he had his lap time deleted. I'm depressed, and I'd like to move on because I don't want to cry today. Thank you. All right, next up, Yuki Tsunoda. Fantastic work from Yuki Tsunoda to get that car up to P8. Kind of where I imagined the V-carb would be this weekend. I actually imagined maybe it would be a little bit higher, but brilliant, brilliant work from Tsunoda. Alonso, like I said, Alonso managing to get P7 and strolls out in P17. Make it make sense, because it doesn't in my mind. How's this happened? What's going on? Hulkenberg. Oh my God, Nico Hulkenberg, that man, sick in the Haas up there. That is the highest qualifying Ferrari-powered car. Sorry, what make it make sense? That's the highest qualifying Ferrari engined car this session. Well done, Nico Hulkenberg, fantastic work. A little bit unfortunate for Piastri to be sitting P5, probably not where he would have expected to be, considering Lando's absolutely flying laps. His lap times were incredible, so a little bit odd that Piastri's so far down. One thing, you can never count Piastri out. That man's a brilliant racer, and I can imagine he will be getting his elbows out tomorrow. Big surprise, Russell and Hamilton. Where did that pace come from? Because they've been complaining all of FP3. I mean, Russell crashed in FP2. They've been complaining all of FP3. They were complaining all of Q1. They just didn't seem like they had good pace. And then Q2, Hamilton went fastest, stuck in a fastest, well, at one point, Hamilton stuck in a fastest lap. And now they've locked out the second row of the grid. I don't know, it just came out of nowhere. Well done to both the boys. I'll be keeping an eye on them tomorrow, 100%, to see what they can do, because they're in a good position to fight for some good points, some podium positions. So very excited to see what happens there. P2, Max Verstappen. Whoa! I went into this weekend being like, Verstappen's highest is going to be like P6. And, this is Max's bogey track, and this is everything we're saying, and he's currently sitting P2. And, he was setting some flying lap times as well, and I was just brilliant work from him. Brilliant work. He is also, classic Max Verstappen. He, after the qualifying session, himself, Lando, and Lewis obviously went into the press conference, and when Max was asked questions, I think the majority of the words that came out of Max's mouth were no comment. I think at one point he actually said to one of the reporters, "Can I actually answer your question outside the conference room, please?" And I think he'd said he'd answer anybody's media questions, just not in the FIA press conference room. He was given no comments. It was absolutely brilliant. In that conference as well, Lando and Lewis were asked about the sort of community service, still don't know what that is, that has been handed to Max for swearing in the press conference. And, Lando was making a joke and he was like, foul language, I think he deserves it. But he was like, nah, it's just, I don't think it's right. And I think it's maybe a bit far. Lewis Hamilton said it was a joke and said that he hopes that Max isn't going to do the community service, because he wouldn't be doing the community service if it was on him, if Lewis had sworn and had gotten the penalty of community service. And do you know what? I'm right there with you, boys. Right there with you. I think it is an utter joke. It's complete nonsense. And I think the best battle that we might have for the rest of the year may not be Red Bull versus McLaren or Max v Lando. I think it could actually be Verstappen v the FIA, because I don't think Max is going to take this lying down. And I can't imagine. He did even say himself, he was like, it's not the stewards. He was like, the stewards just do their job. They just follow what the rule book says. He's like, I'm talking about the people that make the rules. So this is definitely aimed at Mohammed Ben Sulayem. And then Lando Norris storming his way to a pole position. And I'll be intrigued to see this. I think this is definitely a circuit where if you're in front, you want to stay in front, because it's very difficult to overtake around Singapore. But phenomenal work from Lando Norris. And do you know what? If it's not Charles Leclerc on pole, I would take Lando Norris happily. But yeah, blinding work from Lando, from both Mercedes drivers, Verstappen, Hulkenberg smashing targets. Just an all-round great qualifying session. But that is everything from us. We will be back tomorrow after the Grand Prix. Very excited. Love Singapore. I just love a night race. Fucking love a night race. I think they're so good. The cars just pop a little bit better under the floodlights during a night race. So very excited for tomorrow, and I think we're in for a little bit of a spicy race. I can imagine we might be seeing a race safety car if some of the drivers are still struggling and sort of wrestling their cars. There's some very, very close calls today. Obviously, Sainz did hit the barrier, but there is some other drivers that are just more than kissing those barriers, I'll say that. But yeah, very excited. I'll see you tomorrow after the race. Enjoy the rest of your day. Love ya. Goodbye.